start.
Call to order the March 31st, 2022 meeting of the Yukon Capital Project Advisory Board at the City Council Chambers, Yukon, Oklahoma. Roll call, please.
Reynolds.
Here.
Solon.
Here.
Detterar.
Here.
Enmark.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Shelton.
Here.
Roten.
Here.
Carpenter. Gilliland.
Here.
Kretschmar.
Here.
Simmeroff.
Here.
Item 1, consider a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of March 22nd, 22. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review those. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. That carries. We need to vote on that?
Yeah, we need to call the roll on that.
All right, roll call.
Schmidt. Kretschmar. Enmark.
Yes.
Shelton.
Yes.
Gilliland.
Yes.
Detterar.
Yes.
Simmeroff.
Yes.
Reynolds.
Yes.
Solon.
Yes.
Roten.
Yes.
All right. Item 2, a presentation and discussion of the street infrastructure given by Time Design and Arnold Adams.
Good evening. My name is Joe Davis with Team Design. Kind of a funny spelling. So,
Okay.
and again, we provide the city engineering services for the city of Yukon, and we have for quite a few years now. So we'll go ahead and walk through a couple of the corridors we're seeing significant development in. So we'll be looking at proposed development, existing development, and then looking at street improvements that we're looking at through these corridors. So the first one we're going to go ahead and start off with will be 10th Street corridor. And you've probably seen in the past 5 years or so, it's really developed quite a bit. A lot of that goes back to the Turnpike addition with the interchange at 10th Street. We're starting to see quite a bit of traffic going up and down from the east side. And then with the Check Hall interchange, which is Check Hall Cornwell. So with those improvements, we're actually seeing that really blossom out quite a bit. You're starting to see development now occurring in Oklahoma City. So when we first started seeing the development with the Check Hall interchange, we had the Albertsons grocery store at that time, was the first big tenant that came in on that corner. And now we're starting to see other things go ahead and expand to the west. And now we're starting to see things go back to the east. So with that, we'll go ahead and start at the very far end of the project to the east end, and we'll work our way to the west. And again, if anybody has any questions, let's go ahead and talk about it when we start talking about the specific projects. So when we start on Yukon Parkway and start going to the west, the first project that you see at the bottom is complete the trails sidewalks. And what we were looking at was creating a multimodal system on 10th Street. The reason for that, when we go ahead and look at trying to gain support for federal dollars, multimodal projects score extremely high. So while we're having these identified, you may think, well, we don't need sidewalks out there right now. But again, if we're trying to garner support for federal funding, we'll go ahead and throw that in so everybody at least has an understanding what that cost is. So that first project is connectivity with Garth Brooks. And again, we're looking at sidewalks on the Yukon's portion. And again, on 10th Street, just to go ahead and go back through that, 10th Street is the break between Oklahoma City and Yukon. So it's down the section line. There's an agreement that was done with Oklahoma City, though, that Yukon will go ahead and manage all of 10th Street. So when we're looking at the improvements, we'll go ahead and talk about all the improvements for the entire street. Oklahoma City does go ahead and work with Oklahoma City does work with Yukon on new development for driveway locations. So when we start talking about that, we have a little bit of an input trying to line up the proposed developments along with existing streets so we have some type of control where the streets are going to be. If that kind of makes sense to everybody. But when we're talking about, for example, the sidewalks, we're talking about them are going to be on the north side of the road. So the first one is the sidewalk trail project, and it's basically completing the connectivity on the sidewalks. And again, when we're looking at this corridor, we're really looking at a 2-mile-long corridor. And while there's an awful lot of sidewalks that are on the western portion of the corridor, we're still talking about doing improvements to make sure they meet current ADA requirements. So the cost for that project was $1 million. The next project, if we keep on going to the west, is the intersection at Bryce Canyon. And again, that's for a proposed development in Oklahoma City. And again, we are requesting that that lines up with Bryce Canyon. We want our intersections to line up across from each other and not to be offset. It's very difficult when you're trying to enter and exit if they're offset. So again, we like to have them lined across from each other. So with that, we have a signalized intersection proposed at that location. And the cost for that is $2.5 million. And then as we keep on coming, we come to the intersection for the interchange. So the intersection at the, as you can see, we have an existing signal there. Part of our issue that we're starting to see now, we're starting to see traffic, especially if you're headed westbound on I-40, coming off that ramp, gets really congested certain times of the day. So much so that it's a long delay trying to get through that signal. Then once when you get through that signal and you're trying to go west, then we're stacked up when we get to Check Hall, Cornwell. Those signals are not interconnected, so they're working independently, and that creates more to the problem also. So while we're showing no improvements at that signal, we are going to be requesting, as we look at improvements, to go ahead and have that signal interconnected. So you've probably been through signals that are interconnected, which basically means once when you hit a green cycle, if you're going the speed limit and have no serious congestion, you'll keep on hitting green lights as you go through. So then as we go ahead and continue, we finally get to the big intersection that's creating quite a bit of congestion right now, which is the Check Hall Cornwell intersection. And we have another picture we'll go to after we get to the end of this, and we'll really focus on that one intersection. That intersection, we started recognizing we were starting to have some problems even before the on-cue came in. Once when the on-cue came in, we knew that was going to be troublesome, but that was in Oklahoma City. So the city of Yukon worked with Oklahoma City to go ahead and have a traffic study done there on what needs to happen as this corridor develops out. So the next slide I'm going to show you goes ahead and shows what that's going to mean for this intersection. And again, it's only been exacerbated when we started seeing the big shopping center south in Oklahoma City that's come online. So again, we'll go ahead and keep on going to the west. And again, we get to the signal that was built for that one large shopping center for Oklahoma City. If you're going westbound, it has dual left-hand turn signals. If you're going eastbound, it only has a single right. And if you notice, a single left. And if you notice, it's striped out because what we were trying to do is get lane match. So that's why it's striped out. But there's going to be some more development, as you can see, as we keep on going to the west. So they're proposing a large development here. And with that, we're looking at another signalized intersection right there. So that one's at a cost of $2.4 million. And as you see, there's another development that's proposed right next to that that's kind of in the heavy black lined area. And then we get to the intersection of Garth Brooks and 10th Street. And at that location, we're looking at doing something similar that you've seen with the dual left turns. And then we're looking at a right turn dedicated lane also. So again, we're looking at a larger footprint that has more dedicated turning movements than what we currently have there. So that's why we were seeing a cost of $5 million for that project. It's a larger footprint with more turning movements. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Let's see if I can, there we go. So when we go back to Cornwell and 10th Street, we started talking about how big the intersection is going to look like and what that footprint is. And then we can go ahead and talk about, if anybody wants to talk about Charlie's car wash that's been placed in, and the problems that some people are already starting to see with Charlie's coming in. And when we look at new intersections, we can kind of talk about some things that we do to try to control traffic movement through intersections. But to kind of just give a brief overview, right now you can see that there's dual left turns and a dedicated right turn if you're headed westbound. If you're headed eastbound, you've got, again, dual left turns and a right turn. And then if you're going southbound on Cornwell, again, you see the same thing with the dual left turns and a dedicated right turn. And if you're on Check Hall going north, the same thing with the dual left turns and a dedicated right turn. And again, this was a layout that was looked at a few years ago with proposed development that's going on. So the question is, what happens to a Charlie's Car Wash that has a driveway at that one location? If you guys notice what we did on the new interchange when we put the raised concrete medians, and while it hasn't developed out, we went ahead and put those in to try to control traffic so you have more internal circulation as opposed to having the traffic trying to get in on multiple locations on your mainline roads. It's easy now because there's nothing built out there yet. So when we built the project, it's easier to do. We had another project. Has anybody been through the I-40 Morgan Road interchange? And prior to that, it was just a nightmare with all the semi-trucks and all the cars, and there was no control out there. If you've gone out there now, you can see what we did. We added those raised medians. And really what ends up happening, we work with the property owners quite a bit trying to figure out the best way to get circulation in and out. And I think we all recognize this when you make that left-hand turn movement, you're opening yourself out to that oncoming traffic that's going to try to hit you. Right turns, it's more of a glancing blow, but when you're making that left-hand turning movement, it's more of a T-bone accident. So we do everything we can to protect that. When you put in those raised medians, that protects that from occurring. You're not able to have that left-hand turn. So everything's pretty much a right turn in, right turn out. But the thing is, how does it impact the businesses? Can we go ahead and have circulation for them so they can still have similar type of circulation that they have? The issue we're going to have with Charlie's, he's kind of down in a hole. When we look at Check Hall, it's kind of depressed down to the ground. So is there a way we can possibly bring some access to them that they can have another driveway on that corner so they can have some type of internal circulation? Those are the issues that we'd have to talk about and try to figure out how we can work with the property owners to have better access. On Q, quite a bit of an easier issue there because they already have a new driveway that's, on Check Hall. When OnQ came in, if you kind of noticed, we really are looking to have, if you're going westbound, we're looking at the only place that you're going to enter into OnQ is the far east driveway. So if you notice the double yellow stripes that are in front of their far west driveway, and the turn arrows are not there, the turn arrows going in are towards that far east driveway. And again, what we were trying to do is get separation from the intersection when they were proposed coming in. And again, that was something that City of Yukon could go ahead and work with the property owner. Anybody have any questions?
So the car wash today would need another cut, or we'd have to shift their cut where they are today?
So again, that's what the proposal that they had goes ahead and gives them a shielded, basically turn bay.
Mm-hmm.
So it was restriped to go ahead and give a protected turn going into the grocery store, and then for the going eastbound, and it's the same thing going for the westbound. And it's basically 2, maybe 3 cars can be in that storage bay.
Okay.
So it's a little bit safer for the cars that are going eastbound, trying to get into the grocery store, because now they have a dedicated turn bay there. The issue is that when traffic backs up on 10th Street, and Cornwell, there's a smaller gap for those cars that are trying to get into the car wash. And again, that's some of the issues that we try to look at, if we're trying to do a full-blown intersection like what we have shown.
Sure.
So are you proposing to put a second driveway in for Charlie's off of Cornwell? Would Check Hall at that edge?
So I'm not proposing that. What we're saying is we would go ahead and look at some options to give better circulation,
Okay.
safer circulation. And generally, when I go back to that safer circulation, it's trying to do everything we can to eliminate those left-hand turning movements.
Okay.
Now, we all recognize sometimes when you're dealing with property owners, it's very difficult if you're saying you're wanting to change access.
Sure.
So tonight, I'm speaking as an engineer. How's that?
Do they own enough property to do another entrance further west than their current entrance?
So I don't know what their property limits are, but if I'm looking at the aerial, it looks like they've disturbed quite a bit of property there. So it looks like it could be shifted. The issue we start getting into is the interstate bridge at 10th Street and what the grades are there. So again, we have to start looking at those grades and how it access their property. And this same thing starts coming. It's all a balance. So as we keep on going further to the west, we have Holly. And we recognize that at times of the year, especially when we have Christmas lights, November and December, over half of the accidents at Holly, that's when they occur. So those are the peak traffic times we recognize that occur there. So again, we're trying to figure out how we balance the corridor out. Anybody have any more questions? So to kind of give you an idea why everything's kind of put together like this, City of Yukon went ahead and met with ODOT on these projects we're talking about, and City Manager, I'm sure, will go ahead and talk a little bit more about it. But they also understand the need because they're starting to see issues also on the ramps for Check Hall Cornwell. Because when they start seeing traffic backing up on the interstate, that gives them concerns on what can we do to help. Because the worst thing you can have is a semi-truck going 70 miles down I-40 and cars, trying to get off into Yukon, and basically it's a standstill. So that's very dangerous for them. So that's why they're wanting to look at the projects also. So with that, I'll go ahead and go to the next corridor. So the next corridor is Garth Brooks. And again, this is one of those things that Check Hall was constructed a long time ago. And one of the main reasons we were having severe backups on the ramps going into Garth Brooks. So probably, maybe Conrad can help me out with the years on this, but probably 15 years ago, prior to Check Hall, we actually did have cars that were backed up all the way onto the interstate. And that was one of the main reasons we were able to go ahead and get the improvements done for that new interchange. We're starting to see similar types of things happen here just because this corridor has really exploded in the past 15 years. When we first started seeing the lows go in, everything was kind of a domino effect. Yukon hit that magic number for population and then kind of in a regional area, and people wanted to be here. So we started looking at what can we do to help improve things. So we started looking at plans on how to help not only what's happening right now, but to look to the future also. And that future goes ahead and ties into the commercial property that's just west of the hospital, that's zoned for commercial. And it's going to be anticipated development would be sooner since that interchange went ahead and got constructed. but we generally like to see two modes of ingress and egress. So the one mode would be on Health Center Parkway. So what can we do on Health Center Parkway to try to alleviate some of the issues that we're seeing? So we'll start kind of going again a little bit different. We'll go from the south and we'll head back to the north. So one of the issues that we were seeing was at Target Drive, that the turn lanes there, and try to do some modification there to help some of the congestion going in and out at that location. So the cost for that was $250,000. And then we start getting more focused to the Health Center Parkway and Garth Brooks. So with that, we're looking at trying to add some left turn lanes and redo the phasing there. And the cost for that location is $1.1 million. Then we start looking at the actual ramps. And again, ODOT has looked at these projects and concur that there needs to be something done through here. You know, the big issue is how do we get funding to do the improvements? But again, we're starting to see issues here, especially on the trying to go into eastbound on I-40. So there's some improvements that are shown there at that one ramp. So you can see that we have proposed dual left turn lanes. Underneath the interstate proper on Garth Brooks going southbound, we've actually added an additional lane. And you may not think it, but there's actually enough room to add another lane. Again, we've gone ahead and shown sidewalks on here too, but the sidewalks would be on the west side of the piers. So those big round concrete columns, the sidewalk would be on the west side of those big columns. So we'd have to do some work to the slope wall, concrete slope wall, to get that in. And then the additional lane would be added towards the center piers, the center columns. And the reason for that was to go ahead and add that third lane. It would go southbound and then drop off at Health Center Parkway. So the cars that are coming in, especially coming off of westbound I-40, would have an easier way to go ahead and get over to Health Center Parkway if they're trying to get in the back way to that development area. So the cost for that additional lane with was, let's see here, $1.9 million, and then the cost for the trail was $300,000. And again, part of the high cost for that trail, you're just thinking you're putting a sidewalk, but we're having to do modifications to that concrete slope wall underneath those bridges. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's cool. So what was the determining factor to stop there and not take that all the way to 10th? Because there is a cluster of traffic all the way down. Just money?
It really gets to money and right of way. So what we're trying to do is prioritize the biggest needs that we see. And as you can see, if we start adding up the numbers, you're going to see it's a really big number. So what we're trying to do is identify the most cost-effective needs right now. And I'd say, yeah, we could go ahead and extend it all the way down to 10th Street. But again, we're trying to identify and prioritize projects. So if we keep on going north, we see Andrews Drive. And as we keep on going on, Garth Brooks going to the north, probably the biggest issue that you'll see, or the biggest feature you'll see, is we're adding a fifth lane, a consistent fifth lane all the way through. So that goes ahead and gives you that storage in the middle, so everybody can make that left turn and you're not backing up traffic behind. And usually when people feel that pressure's behind them from backing up traffic, they make sometimes not the wisest decisions when they're trying to make that left-hand turn. So you're trying to give them kind of a protected area where they can make that left-hand turn. So the cost of the widened Garth Brooks to 5 lanes is $2.4 million. And that's basically going from the ramps, the westbound ramps, and going to Vandeman Avenue. So also, let me back up just a hair on the westbound I-40 off-ramp. We're adding dual left turn lanes there. and then also a right turn lane. Then at Andrew Drives, we're adding a left turn lane and doing some phasing there for $400,000. And then the last project is improvements to Vandeman Avenue. So again, it kind of goes back to the same thing we've been talking about the dual left turn lanes. And again, the dual left turn lanes, as you can imagine, get quite a few more cars when they're trying to go make that left-hand turning movement. So if I look at the total cost just for this corridor, and that includes all the costs, including construction, right-of-way, utility, moving utilities, and engineering, that one's $8.9 million. And if I can back up to the first corridor, that total cost was $17 million for that corridor.
So the Cornwall corridor was 17? Cornwall, Check Hall?
Right, all the improvements on 10th Street were the 17, let's see what it was, 17 million, and that's that 2 mile stretch from Yukon Parkway all the way to Garth Brooks.
And you said ODOT's interested in participating. Is that financially or of any of
So
that?
I think Ms. Kretschmeyer will go ahead and maybe address that issue if she wants to.
We have been approached by Senator Inhofe's office about being able to apply. They were wanting to know what our priority projects were. In order for us to list any projects as far as road improvements goes, it had to be endorsed by ODOT. And so because I-40 connects to 10th as well as Garth Brooks, there's the exit off of I-40 that backs up that affects 10th Street, and the exit off of Garth Brooks that affects the traffic all on Garth Brooks. They considered supporting us, and we got the letter from them, and ODOT will support us on that. So hopefully that will help us when it comes to the infrastructure bill and trying to get some monies for that. But if we don't, those improvements still need to be made.
And the problem is everybody thinks there's a big pot of money at ACOG that we can go get that money. But for cities like Yukon, it's very difficult because you're competing against Oklahoma City, Edmond, Norman, that has much larger counts than we have. So again, that's how the ranking system has been developed by ACOG, and it's very difficult to try to secure those funds.
Is there a timeline by which we would know some of that federal money would be able to apply? I mean, I'm presuming it would help to know that information before we move to put these improvements on a ballot, right? So, I mean, do we have would the timing work out with our current scope? And
so I would anticipate, even if money is identified for it, there's always a match money, a portion that's going to be on it. So I'd probably still say that there's certain issues that you're going to still have to take care of up front. And if it'd be similar to an ACOG type of project, those type of projects are right-of-way. Everything prior to construction is usually borne by the municipality. And then there's a portion of the cost that for construction that ACOG pays for. The bill that Ms. Kretschmeyer was referring to is still kind of clouded on what's going to be included in the funding. And when we've asked ODOT exactly what's going to be included and what's not, they still have a hard time trying to give us an answer because the bill is so fresh and the rules are still being made. But we would still anticipate that there probably is going to be some element of match that the city's going to have to provide. So if you're asking what that hard number is, I can't tell you.
So we don't have line of sight if that's 50% of it, 75% of it? Rough numbers.
You're correct.
Okay.
The thing though, for example, on some of the projects, we may be able to get more help from ODOT. So for example, when we start looking at the Garth Brooks, when we're looking at the proper right-of-way that actually is owned by ODOT, they're more willing to look at that. They usually will request some type of funding commitment from the city, whether it be a 50%, 30%, or whatever can be negotiated with ODOT.
Okay.
So is that going to be if you have a matching, is that gonna be like a lot of things we do as a school, we have to pay and get reimbursed from the federal government?
So on the ODOT projects, generally they like to have is a commitment from the city, and then before construction starts, there's usually a deposit that's made based on what the estimate is. For the grant that is going through the senator's office, again, the rules haven't been printed yet. Anything else?
Other questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, item 3 on the agenda, open discussion. Obviously.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. We also have Arnold Adams, who's
Oh,
going
I'm
to
sorry.
report on some other streets and roads within Yukon.
My apologies. Thought you were getting out of it, didn't you?
I thought so. I thought, yes. Kind of bad have to follow Joe. Great job, Joe. I'm a little intimidated now. My name is Arnold Adams. I am the Public Works Director for the City of Yukon. In July, I will be here 10 years. Tammy has asked me to put a short presentation together over some future capital projects. So I'll try to go fast as I can. If I get to going too fast, just slow me down and ask some questions. If I can make this all right. Jerome, what am I doing wrong here? You broke it, Joe. That's an engineer for you right there.
Is it turned on?
Well, we can get started. So this is just some capital street projects.
Yeah.
And then this first map, I just want to do a map and remind everyone, this is the corporate city limits of Yukon. Thank you, sir. I bet my office gets 2 to 5 calls daily, and every weekend we come in, we have 10 or 12 reports of potholes, and so we call these people back and try to explain, I'm sorry, but you are not in the corporate city limits of Yukon, but they say, yes, we are. I have a Yukon address. So this is the only place that we can spend our funds are in these corporate city limit boundaries. So in the city of Yukon, we have 380 lane miles of roads. And I was visiting with Tammy today, and I told her every time I see this number, I am just overwhelmed. So to put that in perspective, if you got in your car right now and drove to a little place we all know to have a little steak at the Big Texan, that's approximately 360 miles. You could go to the other side of Amarillo. That's how many lane miles we maintain. So of those, 28 miles are either gravel or chip and seal, and we estimate 70% of those need to be repaired at an approximate cost of $7 million. These costs do not include any engineering or any right-of-way, any utilities, those type of things. These are just to repair the roads. 55 miles of asphalt, which we estimate 60% need to be repaired, $17.6 million, and 297 miles of concrete, which we estimate only 30% needs to be repaired at approximately $37.4 million. So in the corporate limits of Yukon, ODOT maintains Highway 4 and State Highway 66. So we have that in black on this map. So then we'll go through some pictures. I'm sure everybody has seen this. Yukon Parkway. Some more on Yukon Parkway. Wilshire Road, east of Highway 4. Garth Brooks. Holly. So everybody has seen that picture. And Fifth Street, sad to say, this is right outside City Hall here. So when we look at replacing these roads or revitalizing these roads, we look at, first of all, I'll put you first, Joe, engineering. That's always a big, we want to make sure that we get with the engineers, make sure that they drain properly. That's one of the big issues with the roads, making sure that we have a good base and that it drains properly. I think that's the most important. And of course, we always go in, we'll trim the trees back. We put the proper signage and new signage, and if we can, we always add sidewalks to the project. So we kind of put together our top 15 list. I can go through every one of these, or everybody has a list, I believe. But
Did you rank these in order of priority or just top random 15?
yes, I ranked them to my,
Okay, so number one is
yes,
number one on the wish list?
yes. And really, I hate to admit this, but the old cliche, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, I kind of put this list together on how many calls I receive at my office. And I know there's people out there watching, I've called you 100 times. I'm sorry.
All right.
We can get you on the next list, or we can keep adding onto this list. But as you can see, we can go through every project, or we've listed the street name and from location, where to and where. But the gist of it is that if we were to do all 15 of these projects, it would be $26 million.
So, for example, on Wagner Road, it goes up, to Yukon Parkway, Highway 4 to Sarah, right? Is that where we're at
Yes.
on that one?
As you probably are aware of, we are in the process right now
Yeah, tearing that one.
from Highway 4 to
So-
Yukon Parkway.
So how many of these are in flight or budgeted? Because I know Wagner's being done now.
Well, this is actually this is Wagner from Yukon Parkway to
Parkway-
Sarah. It's
Parkway to Sarah,
it's
sorry.
a mile east.
Yep, sorry.
So none of these projects here are funded at
Okay,
this time.
okay. So none of this, that's right, because we're working on Wagner from 4 to Yukon Parkway, not the
Yes.
other way. Got it. Okay.
Sorry, mine didn't last as long as Joe's, but
You're good.
On number 15, the Redbud Avenue Vandament intersection.
yes.
Did you look at Redbud itself? Because it's pretty awful.
We have, and like I said, I'm gonna get 200 phone calls in the morning. What are you thinking? And we have currently, and I apologize, I am working on assessing every street in Yukon, and we're ranking those, so I hope to get that out. Tammy's gonna, how come you didn't have it tonight? I will have it shortly. Within the month, I will have a complete map of every street in Yukon with the ranking. So, yes, we have looked at Redbud, and we just tried to prioritize a list of 15. And we probably could have went to 100, and all of those would be number one if we had our rathers. But when you start looking at $26 million, how far do we really?
And none of these are funded today. We don't have any city budget to support this at all?
For none of these projects, no, sir.
Will Wilshire remain on this list?
We are in the process right now, as you know, of de-annexing that. We received a timeline. Mitchell sent that to me. So Wilshire will be taken off of that because we are in the process of getting that de-annexed.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
So item 3, open discussion. I guess to the group, but based on what we've heard, thoughts, comments?
I'm just thinking that how important it is that we have conversations with our friends and our neighbors that these are things that we don't think of every day that have to be done, and they have to be funded. I mean, so when I'm out in the public or where talking to people, residents, part of my conversation is like, we're not just going to be asking for money so we can just go out and spend it on whatever. Like, we have to fund these things. So that's great information to have in our hands and in our minds. So we appreciate the work that's been done.
Absolutely. Other?
In my opinion, the Frisco Road, the only open areas in Yukon that we have to expand, and we have the brand new off-ramp right there. I would like to think if, the property behind the hospital, people coming from El Reno or west of town, you're going to come off there at Garth Brooks. If the road was better at Frisco, if you drive down it right now, you'd lose a semi.
Mm-hmm.
It's, to me, there's some property out there that's valuable to the city that we could get tax dollars off of if it was developed.
Are you talking about south of I-40 on Frisco?
Yes, ma'am.
Some of that is Oklahoma City. So we've tried to get them to come out there and fix some of those roads, and we call, but they have not come out and fixed
Okay.
the road. So that's not Yukon. It's it's on they have half of the road. Right. So the west side is the Oklahoma City's half. But where does it, Mitchell? That quarter section, half mile north of 10th.
Overall, I think as a city, we're liable if we don't do some of these things, because if, not only to cars, but if people fall in these holes, that's going to be a problem.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that a lot of people think about is we talk about getting people into Yukon, right? So you have to make it easy for them to get into Yukon as well. Talking about the interchanges off of Garth Brooks and Cornwell and those interchanges, because if it's easier to just turn left and go to the shopping malls on the south side of 10th, or just get back on the highway and leave, we lose a lot of opportunity in Yukon.
Definitely. People are going to go where it's convenient to get to where they want to be.
Yeah.
And the traffic is horrendous right now on 10th Street. Oklahoma City is, they're going to be developing approximately 750 apartment complexes or units at 3 different locations. You could see them on the map that Joe had. So that's going to add even more traffic. If you even doubled that to 10th Street, it's bad now. You think it's bad now.
Yeah, it only gets worse.
Yes.
And Yukon is responsible for 100%
Yes,
of
sir.
the cost.
Yes, sir.
On 10th Street.
Yes, sir.
So some quick back at the napkin math, I think all the projects we heard about tonight are $53 million. Does that add up about to where? Pretty close to where we landed there? Yeah, I think we're pretty close to about that $53 million mark. So what are our thoughts, I guess, as a group to consider what we would do for something? I know we had a timeline on a ballot for May 3rd. Is that right, Tammy? We talked last time?
The timeline, we could either do an August ballot or a January election.
Yeah, yeah. So thoughts on, do we want to talk about some level of voted on city tax to sales tax? I think that was the overwhelming majority, if you think back to the survey we talked about, right?
Yes, sir.
Much more so than additional property tax. That was pretty clear in the survey. Nobody
Yes,
voted
sir.
for that. I think, as we're considering next topics, we probably need to understand how maps work or something like that, what a city sales tax could look like, and what level of funds we could probably bring, is my thoughts as a next topic of what we really need to understand.
So, what about, or what is our, and I don't know this, our hotel tax? Do we have a hotel tax in Yukon?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And it is specific as far as what we can spend that money on. It's parks and recreation, tourism. Roads do not qualify for the hotel motel tax.
Okay. So those are earmarked funds we can't touch for that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
How is our current sales tax broken down? So we are 8.85%, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The state is 4.5. The county is 0.35. And the city gets the rest. Now, we have a 2% that goes to our pest accounts, our reserve.
Out of that leftover amount?
Yes,
It's earmarked to that?
yes,
2%. Okay.
yes.
And what is the sales tax of the surrounding cities?
I'd have to get a comparison for you on that.
Mustang is 8.85%. Oklahoma City is slightly less, but I don't know which parts of Oklahoma City, because there is differences too in those, but I think Oklahoma City is either close to or at 7 point something.
And as I mentioned before, I believe at the last meeting, that if the state legislature passes the no state sales tax, the municipality will still get it, but on grocery sales, then that would be great for us, because people are used to spending 8.85%, and if 4.5 of it goes away, that will help us.
My question there, though, is if that 4.5 is going away for your food, but not for the rest of whatever you're buying, not even in your groceries, your soda pop or your junk food or whatever, but that's not going away. But we add another portion to that. We have now increased. It's not just off of food. We're not just adding to the food portion. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
So when we built a new high school in Durant, and then this is probably something you guys already considered. There was a sunset on the sales tax for it was a certain amount, and it sunsetted at 20 years or whatever the payment was, just like maps.
Just like maps. That's a temporary sales tax, but they have continued to renew it.
Right.
When you prove you can do good things and you're responsible with the money, then people are like, yeah, let's go, let's make it.
Yes, they see that things are happening and that you're using the money for the things that you said you were going to use it for. We have figured that if we did a 1% sales tax, it would bring in approximately $6 million a year for that 1 cent.
So when you do that, you can, and you, just because I deal with bonds all the time like this, but you can have revenue, you can have lease revenue so that you can go ahead and afford a $30 million project
Yes.
up front when you use that $6 million annualized over however many years. So that's a good,
So we don't have to wait until we get all of the money in before we can
Accumulated.
start a project.
What's the timeline of execution for all those projects? So if we, said go, how long does it take to do all of that? Is that 5 years worth of work? Is it 8 years worth of work? 1 year?
I would say approximately 5 years.
Okay.
The thing we have to be looking at sequence of construction is we don't want to really tear it up all at the same time.
Sure.
So probably close to what he's saying, close to the 5-6 year period.
Okay.
Again, they're trying to phase it so everything's not quite at once.
Right.
I have a question just to back up a little bit on the Garth Brooks project. If we did expand that project to include that distance from the Health Center Parkway to 10th Street, I would be interested to hear that number. And as the city council representative, I'll explain why. It's been kind of a theme, and the last couple of years that we've had to ask ourselves, why didn't this happen like 20 years ago when it would have made sense? And who knows the answer at this point. But so as a council, we've been trying to think, are there things that we could go ahead and do and prepare so that 10 years from now, nobody has to say, why didn't we do that 10 years ago? I would be curious to see the whole project, especially with all the new things going in on 10th Street. If that could relieve some of that pressure, it might be worth it. But I understand we'll probably be looking at phases also for all these, so that would make sense also.
We can bring in our financial advisor from BOK Securities, and he can come in and explain everything to you about adding the sales tax and what it would cost and the debt service and everything that has to go with that, and how it was done in Oklahoma City. We can bring him in at the next meeting or the meeting after that. I know Ms. Sullivan had said something about it, but you're supposed to be gone at the next meeting. You can watch the meeting on Facebook. We are showing it live. So that's up to you all whenever you want to.
is it the same, Tammy, that you guys, if you want to have an election, you have to call for it 90 days out?
Yes,
So that's May,
yes,
if you want to do an August election.
yes, sir.
So we're up against the clock.
So if we do these, does this preclude consideration of any other the other?
No, you can
Proposed.
still consider other projects. It just is going to depend on what the projects you decide to recommend and how much they're gonna cost and how much time it's going to take to generate that much revenue.
Can he, this button, I'll just leave it on. Can he also give us an estimate of what your sales, city revenue would be, how it would increase with the repeal of the state sales tax?
Yes.
And that,
Mm-hmm. So if there's any other topics that you all want to discuss, any other projects, we need to decide on that. I know it was mentioned before about an economic impact that Eric had spoke about, and hopefully we can have that done before the next meeting.
How about liability of the new firehouse, or if we're expanding west,
Mm-hmm.
what does that leave us open to if we don't have firehouse coverage in that area? Or it's significantly delayed compared to other parts of the city?
We can have the fire chief here and have him explain all of that.
Do we have an estimated cost of some of these other projects yet?
What other projects?
One of the ones that were in the surveys and things like that. So like the dog park or the extra library event center,
Community
senior center.
Yeah.
Do
No.
we have any proposed?
No, we don't have any
possibilities?
estimates.
Okay.
We don't have plans on the shelf that whenever the money becomes available, so we would have to get those done. And just like our road projects, we had our engineering company put those figures together so that we could have those available.
Any other discussion?
I'd like to, I'm kind of curious throughout this process if we're supposed to, on this advisory board, put forward projects like we haven't talked about the Frisco project, haven't talked about community centers, haven't talked about, you know, what do we do with our current ones? Do we improve them? Do we fix them? Do we leave them? One of the questions I have is what does the city currently have in budget to take care of infrastructure, like annually, like what road improvement budget do we have, and is that going to cover some of these projects? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Are we just trying to raise it for all of it? Because it seems like as Yukon is growing, and you have you know, possible park to attract people to Yukon, you know, like a sports complex, that's going to bring infrastructure problems. And so if we deal with this and have beautiful roads, but then have nobody coming to look at them, I'm kind of curious if that's the thing we're supposed to discuss, you know. You know, just driving around Yukon, it is kind of like, oh, dang, I lived in a third world country and some of these roads are worse than those. So that should be fixed. But at the same time, we're sitting on a bunch of stuff on Frisco Road, for example, that I know that was a huge expense. So what are we doing to attract whatever there, you know? So the more, you know, if there's a big sports complex, that's going to attract more businesses that are going to be there, and that's going to be increased revenue and so on. So just kind of curious, you know, what's the priority? Because I think all this stuff is like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like we've inherited this, you know, street problem and we're trying to raise money for it, but then we also have these future projects that we want to work on.
Yes, all of our infrastructure is old. That goes for our roads, our buildings, and we don't have enough money to put in our budget to do a facelift. We've got some things now that are wrong with some of our buildings that we've been trying for the last year to try and fix. We've got a project for our Jackie Cooper gym. It is leaking. You can see water running down the walls inside of it. It was going to cost us $181,000 to fix that a couple of months ago, and now the price is up to $249,000.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're trying to do everything we can right now to fix what we have. We've made a lot of improvements at Jackie Cooper Gym or at YCC, but there's still improvements that need to be made. And we're trying to do our best to put those items in the budget and do those. The sales tax that we have been receiving since it has been up has helped out a lot with our capital. But there's not enough money in there to do some of these new projects. If we wanted to build a multi-generational community center, if we have figures from 10 years ago on the sports complex. That's when it was all going to be soccer fields. But Lord knows where that is now. The dirt work alone was $7 million, and that was 10 years ago. Did I answer your question?
The one question is, you know, annually, what's actually in the budget to do road work? Because I know that's something that should be built in. I don't know if it is, but because when you drive around, I've been here 6 years, and it's hard to remember when roads were actually even cracks fixed. You know, I know it's happened a couple times, but not much.
Right
So I'm kind
now-
of curious what's in the budget, you know.
Right now, all we're doing is trying to repair things as they become broken.
Yeah.
Capital, I believe, like striping, I think this next year we want to put it at 100,000 to try to do as much of it as we can, all of those different phases. Concrete work or asphalt on roads, I think we put it at 75,000, 100. So that's where our budget is, and that really doesn't go very far.
And then kind of just a general observation, you know, I was driving down more aware in the last couple weeks, you know. You forget things, you just get used to things, you know,
Yes.
over time. And I noticed even some signage that, you know, says Moose Lodge, and I'm like, that's been gone for a decade or better, you know. So it's like those kind of things. I'm like, you know, what are we doing that doesn't cost really anything? Just I mean, it takes maybe time, you know. Those are the kind of things that I don't know if we want to talk about. What project should we talk about? Because we can't tackle them all. So, you know, this survey has some aspirations, but you know, what is it that we actually should tackle during this advisory committee? I mean, we could take the next 10 years and be on this committee for 10 years and then never, I don't know, you know, that's not my plan. So I'm just kind of curious because we've only talked about roads and infrastructure, but what else do we want to talk about as far as projects?
So if, I'm sorry, did I? So if the advisor comes, be okay, the financial advisor comes and says like, okay, over the next 5 years with sales tax removed, with the state sales tax removed, and if you do 1.5%, then we get a budget. Then we get a finite number. Then he can also tell us what type of lease purchase we can do. And I think at that point goes to what you're saying. Then where do we prioritize it? I think we have to find out how much money we're going to get first, because we know roads are huge. We know community involvement is huge, but we don't know what we have. We don't know.
Right.
So I think that's where we start. Again,
And I think that's the
know-
frustration is like
Right.
it's all
That way
guessing.
we're not just spinning
Yeah,
our wheels
yeah.
like you said. We could sit here and talk for projects forever. But
Right.
once we get a dollar figure, once you call
Well,
for
and
that
56
election,
million is kind of like, whoop, okay.
Yeah,
You know, it's like that's a big chunk, and it would be awesome just to have a perfect system, but that's obviously not gonna. That's probably not.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think,
roads and concretes and parking lots just aren't sexy. They're just not. You know.
yeah,
but we gotta
neither
do
are.
it.
Yeah, they're not.
I think it's smart to have the financial advisor at the next meeting, start with that, how much would we have to work with, and then, because there's, I mean, 59 million or whatever already just for the roads, and so I think it'd probably be good to start with that.
We'll have him here.
And then one more question. Sorry. So our source of income, we're thinking tax, but is there any other possibilities for a source of income, or is that the only one we're looking at?
Property tax.
Yeah, but I mean, outside of property tax, like, so sales tax, is that really our only? I'm just trying to think if there's another creative way that we could think about these projects. You know, I don't know. But is that the one we're looking at? Is just a sales tax increase, penny or percentage or whatever?
I think that's what the survey said, but I think you're either gonna go with an increased sales tax or you're gonna go with, property tax.
Okay.
If I did
Because-
my quick math correctly, Oklahoma City currently charges 8.63% tax. So if the state takes away 4.5, that takes them down to 4.13. And if we go from our 4.35 and add 1%, we've now gone to 5.35. And as Eric said last time, we have to be really, really careful about not sending people out of our city because we've pushed too hard. If they can go get 4.13 taxes in Oklahoma City and not Yukon, there's a lot of people that will think about that.
Yes, just for
Just for groceries.
Yeah, it's just for groceries.
Yeah. Well, but ours won't be just for groceries. So, I mean, there's a thing. We'll have to really make sure that we don't push people away, like Eric said last time, with raising. Some people won't notice. But right now, everybody's noticing every penny. So, because there aren't any pennies. And there's, when gas is $5 a gallon, it's hard. So, we have to really make sure that we don't push our citizens too hard.
I understand.
Other discussion?
Well, not to be a pain, but are there any other projects that we want to discuss? And not tonight, but just to have on the horizon, I mean, the Frisco project is something that I've been here 6 years, and we voted on it back then, and it's just been sitting there, and now we have an interchange, we have a road, we have a nice, basically no stop signs there, and I'm just like, okay, is that one that we want to look at? Or are we just pushing that to somebody else, So I don't know. That's one project that I'd like to discuss.
One of the questions on the survey was, what do we want to do with that property? And a lot of people answered, they gave their honest opinion on what they thought we should do with it, whether it was to sell it or what we have been trying to do is see if we can get, because our deal with Oklahoma City is that we would make it a world-class soccer complex, and that is in the agreement. And so we have to get Oklahoma City to agree to take that out of the agreement and allow us to put public buildings on it, make it a public, for public land use. We also thought about possibly putting some retail on it. Then if we do that, Oklahoma City will want to share the sales tax with us, and so that's one of the things that is also one of the factors that is in the works. We are trying to get Oklahoma City to change that agreement because they put in there, we put in there before that it was a world-class soccer complex. Because we had thought, well, what if we put a multi-generational community center out there, and library? We had looked into that before, and there were some plans that were drawn up. But we can't do anything really until we get them to agree to that. So that's one of the things that, we don't have to use the land just for a sports park. We can use it for a community center or a library or some type of facility, but that's up to you all. I'm just mentioning what the survey said so that.
So I guess if we're going to look into that project, I'd like to understand what the agreement with Oklahoma City is and what we'd have to overcome when we make that decision. Right. So if we're going to pursue it, I think we need to know what we're up against.
We've been pursuing it. It's that, and that's what it is. We've been talking to them for quite a while.
Okay.
Could it also have other sports there with the change and not just soccer?
Yes, it could.
Okay, so
It
that
could.
has to be with Oklahoma City too.
We want to be able to change it to whether or not it's another sport, whether or not it's anything for public use, plus if we could use the first 600 feet for possibly retail, because we put that in the TIF, and we are wanting to do that, but an agreement has not been made with Oklahoma City to do that, but we have been working on it for quite a while.
If I understand correctly, the area that we're talking about here is this little jaggedy thing right in here that we annexed back from Oklahoma City at one point on the Frisco Road. Is that correct?
It is at 66 and Frisco Road.
And Frisco, and that, so, but everything
Yes.
to the west of that, we maneuvered and got back from Oklahoma City. Is that correct? When we were
Yes.
looking at the first
We
sports park?
purchased it and they de-annexed it and
Okay.
we annexed it.
With stipulations, though.
Yes. I'm sorry?
With stipulations.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Since that topic came up, I'd like to just express my thought, and I want to also preface it by mentioning this is my personal view as a member of this committee, not as a representative of the city council. But in my mind, of course, we've got to develop the area, and over time it will develop. In my mind, I would love to see us be proactive in that area. If there was recreational facilities on that land, everything from a community center with an aquatic center, indoor track, you know, anything you could imagine, plus sports fields that could be built around this type of facility. What would that do for the development across the street or perhaps at the front of that property? I would just ask people to imagine if we have a facility like that, that people could drive into town on Friday with their kids and park at the hotel on Frisco Road and never get back in their car until Sunday evening, because there'll be hotels, restaurants, entertainment, and their sports right across the street. So, I mean, that's a short version of kind of what I could see as a possibility. And of course, it all comes back to revenue and do we have it or could we have it? But since the topic of Frisco came up, I would just like to express my personal vision for that area.
I agree. I think the vision of that property and the annexing it is almost a secondary Garth Brooks feel, but with extra amenities. You know what I'm saying? Like the Garth Brooks, the problem with Garth Brooks, let's say there's a problem, is all the stop signs as you're going. That one doesn't have any. It has the one stop, right in the middle. But it's something that eventually is going to all connect together. I mean, El Reno and Yukon is going to grow together, you know, as far as just what you see already. Now, I lived in Central America for 30 years of my life, and I went back six months ago to look at where I was living just 6 years ago. And it's a main road, just like we're living on here. And everything has been developed, like everything. And if we can jump ahead and get the infrastructure ready, I mean, like we've already done, it would be amazing. It really would be. And I think our attention needs to be on that, and also making Yukon just a great place to drive through, you know. But obviously money is a big deal, but I think we should have something down there. I think that would be honoring to Yukon. So.
At the same time, I'm going the other end of the spectrum, and we are an aging population in the world, and the senior population is blossoming. Leading Age has coined the term. It's a tsunami of seniors is going to be hitting and there's not a lot of services for seniors to accommodate the aging of us baby boomers. So if we can, whether it's there as part of that community center or do something that will attract and help keep seniors healthy so they can stay in their homes and not become a Medicaid nursing home recipient or need, that certainly will help keep viability in the city as well.
Okay.
And to be blunt, your generation has the money, so we definitely want to not forget that.
Some of us.
And they vote.
Not all.
And her generation, and that generation votes too.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
So, you know, you put all this stuff together, but you also talk about, and from my viewpoint, over 9,000 students this year, the largest we've ever had. We have lots and lots of kids that play sports. They leave to go play their parents go with them to go other places.
Right.
So, and then we have a burgeoning swim team that does a great thing, but they have no place to swim in Yukon. You know, you put the community center with aquatics, which goes back towards what you were saying with some of the, my wife teaches silver sneakers. She has a passion for silver haired, not just me, but older than me that need exercise. It's just it is a huge thing, and it's just a psychological, physical, just so many benefits. But you put all that together in the community center, and then you have your baseball and your softball and your soccer fields out there. We see what it's like when on weekends when you go in another direction. We don't need to go in that other direction. We need to come this direction, and that'd be such a huge draw. And that goes back to your revenue question too. What is it? I don't like the movie, but if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of thing.
I agree. And it's a try. If you look at our community centers that we have right now, and if you added that, we'd have like a triangle of community centers. And if we improved them, it would be a place for seniors for multi-generation. It'd be awesome. A little glimpse of it is over at the football fields and the soccer fields that are on what is that? Cemetery Road, you know, going north. Just that over on the side. If you could envision that, but with complex, it would be phenomenal. Yeah.
Make it a real thing.
Yeah.
And one other thing we're not even thinking about is Route 66. All the people that travel all over and all the, I mean, we have a lot of cities in Oklahoma that Route 66 is huge. So we need
And
to
El
play
Reno
on.
is improving theirs.
Uh,
That looks
yes,
real
they are.
sharp.
Mhm.
So,
So
yeah.
that's another, get them to Yukon.
Other discussion? Item 4, any visitors this evening? Open topics? Not on the agenda? All right. Discussion of future topics, I think we kind of maybe roll that into, into our open discussion, so I think we're good there unless anybody has any other comments or thoughts. All right, item 6, we are scheduled, I think, for April 14th, 7 p.m. here for the next meeting. Tammy, we're good on topics for, we'll have budgeting and start to develop some thoughts on what we can do to grow.
Yes, sir.
All right. Without any opposition, we are adjourned.